It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce and Michael. I know a ghost story or two. Let's do this.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bigfoot Collectors Club, the podcast where we talk to celebrity guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I am your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host.
Hey, guys. Bryce Johnson here.
And your producer,
Riley Bray.
You know, Bryce, you've really gotten in the habit of just really adding some more Sasquatch vocalizations at the top. Do you just want to get it out? You want to?
Yes. No, sorry. Now I feel stupid.
Well, no, why?
I love it. That song,
Squatch
every
it
time
out,
I
man.
squatch it out, bro. That song just gets my gizzard every
That's
time.
our new horrible merchandise. Squatch it up, bro.
Squatch it up, bro.
I feel like we would make $1 million. Oh,
We could put that on the merch. Squatch it out.
Oh yeah. Speaking of merch,
Yeah.
pretty soon we're gonna be
I'm in talks with my boys.
posting up. We're gonna post some ideas for some options for T-shirts. We want to hear from you guys. You might be get a chance to vote what our first T-shirt will look like.
Yeah, my good buddies at Tank Farm are going to make us up some mock-ups. So
Yeah, and we have some other merch in the works. We keep saying it.
It's coming.
Gonna happen.
It's coming. Relax. Good things take time.
Our guest today knows all about podcast merch. She has a mini podcast empire.
Wow.
You may know her from shows such as Totally Lame, Totally Married, Totally Mommy.
Wow.
There's a spinoff not including her called Totally Beverages and Sometimes Hot Sauce.
Awesome.
And she's a writer on the hit True TV show. True TV, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, God, I had a panic there for a moment. I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, it's part one of our Totally Lame two-parter. Please welcome Elizabeth Laime.
Yeah. Woo!
Hi.
Oh my gosh, what an intro.
Oh, man, I'm nervous today.
I'm nervous.
Why?
You shouldn't be.
I know, but
The old pro you.
I think that you were your show is maybe one of the first podcasts I was ever on, and I was on it because I wrote you asking if I could be.
Oh, that's amazing.
I had to
Loser.
No, I had forgotten that. I was certain that we had asked you on, and then you
No.
reminded me recently.
I self-promoted.
She's like,
to
you
be
were the
a-
only guest to actually write to be on.
No, I love it, and now we've become friends, and you
Yeah.
are part of the Totally Lame fam.
Oh, man, I
that's
love that
awesome.
show. So Totally Lame was your first podcast
Yeah.
you did for a number of years. And then you guys branched off, did some spinoffs. At one point, talk about, man, we have a hard enough time putting up one episode a week. I mean, not really. It's fun. But at one point, you and your husband, Andy, were putting out 5 episodes of different shows
Holy
a
Mac.
week. Like one a day?
No, I think at max, please, we did 4. No,
Yeah.
I think we were doing 3 or 4.
Because there was a period where you were doing Totally Lame, 2
Two
episodes of Totally Married,
What were we doing?
Totally
Wow.
Mommy, and then he was doing T-Bash.
All I can think about is all of the better ways we could have been spending
Well,
our time.
we're figuring it out right now. This is our 24th episode.
Oh my God,
officially.
congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
Although we've
so
had a couple
cool.
like mini episodes and like listener episode in and about there. So we're
Yeah.
still new at this.
You're
Actually, I think you are airing the week. You and then Andy will be on next week. This 2-parter is falling right at our 6-month mark. So happy
Oh,
birthday,
wow.
guys!
Oh,
Congratulations!
Thank you. Happy.
6 months.
Yeah,
We've been
that's
doing it for
awesome.
6 months.
That's amazing.
We haven't missed a week yet.
No,
That
we
is
have
so
not.
good.
And you know, it's like, what a time to be doing it, actually. I was watching the season premiere of Ancient Aliens, and
what a
and,
time.
I
What a
know.
time we live in.
It was, but they were talking about that big New York Times article that came out in December, and so we've really been on in the 6 months where a lot is happening in the UFO world and in the
Yes,
Oh,
and
yeah.
as we talked about last week with Allison Munn and the cult
yeah,
world,
in the cult world
the
that's
serial
happening.
killer world. Have you
Yes.
were you
Oh,
following
lots
Michelle
going on.
McNamara's book?
Well,
did you?
yeah,
the whole Golden State Killer thing.
Killer thing I've been riveted.
That's fascinating.
I also wanted to tell you, just to tee up and get any listeners excited, Andy is a cult he's very
Expert.
No, I wouldn't say expert, but he majored in sociology.
Oh, wow.
And at the University of Montana, and his favorite professor there is one of 2 people who infiltrated Heaven's Gate.
No way.
I won't share it all because he'll go into more detail, I'm sure.
dude.
But
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
wow,
pretty cool.
that's a great setup. I can't wait to hear more about that.
Boy,
so
that
he
is
must
so
have an
cool.
insight into he must be sort of fascinated by what draws these people in and
Tell us more
keeps
about
them
your
there.
husband.
I know. I'm like, God damn it. His episode's going to be so. Harry told me this morning we have a couple of ghost stories. And he was like, you better not. They're kind of more his. And so he's really throttled me here.
You're gonna be fine.
right.
You're gonna be golden. I know. I got a good feeling about you as a guest.
Great.
As I said, I've been listening to your shows for years. I think it actually was the first episode. Speaking of Michelle McNamara, was Patton Oswalt's episode. That's how I discovered your podcast, because I was in the days when I see it too. There's clearly people, and tell me if this still happens on Totally Lame. But there's clearly listeners who just follow wherever that celebrity, wherever they show up, but may not listen to the show beyond that. So like we've gotten hit, like Paul F. Tompkins was on our show, of course, and like everyone who listens to everything Paul F. Tompkins does to show up, they listen to his episode. We hope they stick around. They don't always, you know. But I listened for Patton Oswalt, and I stayed for Liz and Andy.
Stuck around.
To the point where it's what happens with podcasts, and yours was like really the first one that I got really into. The crazy thing that happens, and this was all around the time when like Twitter was taking off, and people were actually like meeting people. This is when social media was actually still social,
Right.
where I was like, oh, I have actually made, there was like a little window of time where I actually made friends with people off Twitter and through podcasts. But I think I emailed you and I was like, hi, I'm an actor. I love this show. I would love to come be on the show. And I remember you wrote back,
I love that.
oh, wow. And I was like, oh, God, I creeped them out.
No. Because at the time we also watched True Blood. So imagine me getting that email and being like, what? Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Then.
It's the
totally.
most. I love your show. I love you guys.
That's really sweet.
So
God, I
thank
wish
you.
everything worked like that,
I know. Hey, I love your TV show. Can I be on it?
Sure,
please?
yeah.
Before we move on with getting into Elizabeth's world, we have some beep-a-dee-beeping BCC news. A search is underway for Bigfoot in Lee's Summit, Missouri.
Hey-o.
Near Kansas City, where I grew up, and not too far from St. Louis. Were you Ladue? Where were you from?
Ladue.
Yeah, Ladue. That's where my buddy, shout out Mark Silverberg, grew up. After a Boy Scout leader and his troop found Sasquatch tracks outside their campsite at Lake Jacomo 3 weeks ago.
I feel good about this one.
According to KNBC 9 News in Kansas City, Scout leader Jeff Newhard and his troop, quote, heard the chattering at night from their tent, but Newhard added, I was curious, but I wasn't that curious to run down there.
Right.
So they heard some creatures at night making noise.
The Bigfoot sounds.
This guy out near the lake with his Cub Scouts. Now, Newhard called in national Bigfoot hunter and controversial figure Tom Biscardi, who has joined Newhard in tracking the area and installing night vision cameras to hopefully capture footage of the creature. Biscardi thinks this case is a strong one due to the footprints discovered and the number of caves in the Lake Jacomo area, which they are exploring for evidence.
Totally.
Biscardi told reporters, the caves you people have in Kansas City, they're phenomenal because these are places where creatures love to habitat. BCC will be keeping an eye on this story for further developments.
Wow, very interesting.
Now, Dave Keith, a friend of ours who's also from Kansas City, he pointed out that Tom Biscardi was the Bigfoot hunter that came under some heat a couple years ago.
Which one doesn't?
Well, I guess he was charging admission to see a Bigfoot corpse that was proven to be a hoax.
Yeah, that's...
Coast to Coast won't have him on the air anymore.
Right, I remember
So
this.
I don't know if this scout leader just probably Googled Bigfoot hunter, I'm sure, and this is one of the first ones that came up. But
he's looking to
Might
get
wanna
back
look
in good
at the-
graces.
Yeah, might want to look at the third entry down.
Strong
because
recommendation.
the second one
good
is
call.
probably...
Good call.
Yeah. Yeah. So good luck. I hope this doesn't turn into. I hope he doesn't take over the
But how true is that? I mean, you're in your tent at night and you hear something, and even if you're like, okay, I'm not a big Bigfoot believer, but something is out there making noise.
Oh, you hear a large animal. I remember one time
I'm not going out there.
We took a road trip. Some buddies and me took a road trip up to. Do you know Brian Steele actually?
Yes, yeah.
So it was me and Steele and our buddy Holt and our friend Brian Carlin.
Holt Bailey.
Holt Bailey.
Oh yeah.
We got to get them on the show too. We took a road trip up to Vancouver, and we stopped over in this little seaside town in Oregon to stay the night. And we had talked about maybe camping somewhere along there, but we pulled into a motel, and they did not have a room. It was just like the Nativity story. No room at the inn, and we asked if we should camp. And he said, no, you don't want to camp in this area. And I said, why? And he's like, there's mountain lions. And we're like, oh, okay. And I shit you not, I walked out. We were in that little, like, when you pull up to a motel, and there's that little, like little covering. Thank you. And I walked in front of the car. The headlights were on. I sat down on the driver's side. Holt was in the passenger side seat. And I looked up just in time to see the back half of a fucking mountain lion move into bushes through the headlights.
Oh, my God.
And I look over, and the guys, Steele and Carlin in the back were not paying attention. Holt's eyes were, he's like, that was a puma. I was like, it was a mountain lion. He goes, it was a puma. I go, it was a mountain lion. Same thing. So we drove down there was a meteor shower that night. We drove down to the beach, and we all got up and were watching the meteor shower. And we were all kind of chilling, watching the skies. And then we heard this. And without saying a word, all four of us shot up and just like Chinese fire drill style, just got back, slam, got in the car and drove off.
God.
Yeah.
So you hear in the dark those sounds. It doesn't matter if it's a Sasquatch or not. I mean, it's scary.
That's terrifying. And also, are we all going to just move past the fact that that's the most sexually charged 4-man road trip I've ever heard of?
I know, the meteor showers down there, watching it at night.
Yeah, it was a very romantic trip. We were trying to find a place where we could all sleep together and watch the stars.
Wow. Good
We've
for you
never
guys.
charged Mike with not being a romantic. Busted.
We had a good time on that trip. We drove through. When we get Steele and Holt on the show, we'll talk about it. But we drove through the redwoods and listened to some classic coast to coast Bigfoot stories.
And that honeymoon sounds awesome.
It was beautiful.
Totally.
Oh yeah, you don't know about my secret gay marriage with 4 men?
I didn't know about it until now, and I'm happy to hear about it.
Thank you. It's our little cult. So, Elizabeth.
Yes.
What is your personal paranormal history?
Well,
there's no wrong answer to this question.
I've
PS.
always been terrified of ghosts.
Great.
There was like lore in our family that my parents lived in this house in Robertson, Illinois, which is this tiny podunk town. I actually looked up this house recently, and it's for sale for like $70,000.
Buy it.
Oh, wow.
I should. The claim to fame was that the Heath Candy Bar Factory was in this town.
Cool.
And
is this going to involve a haunted candy factory?
No, I wish. But the house had been there forever, and I guess my mom would wake up in the middle of the night and there would be sounds coming from downstairs, to the point that the joke was that my dad wouldn't go check it out. Rappers, there's just chocolate everywhere. There was like weird acid around the toilet bowl rims because the ghost was bulimic. It's actually very sad. No, but there would be like...
Turns out it was just a rabid raccoon with a binging problem.
A binge purge disorder. Yeah. Anyway, the faucets would be turned on without them turning them on.
That's
and
creepy.
Someone came to see the house who had been in the family that the house belonged to before my parents bought it. They wanted to like see the house, and they said that people had seen the grandfather who had originally built the house like standing by the fireplace. And so So then when my parents were moving and they were putting it for sale, my dad was upset with my mom because she had told everyone in town that this place was haunted and they couldn't sell it or whatever.
Not good.
Amazing.
So,
well, it is for sale, but it is extremely haunted.
Yes.
But let me show you the kitchen.
But a steal of a deal for
Yeah.
$70,000 or whatever it is now. Then I was thinking, like, before this, just town folklore. I lived in St. Louis, and there was a house in Ladue that had, and I'm curious if anyone who's listening to this knows what the fuck I'm talking about. Can I? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, yep. Okay. So there was this house with a garage, and it was on this little lake, and it was called Laughing Lake. And there,
I'm already not going anywhere near that water. That is a scary fucking name
and
for
it was
a
like,
lake.
It's so weird because Ladue's very like manicured and whatever. And this lane was all windy. And once you got back there, it felt very kind of like swampy. And there was this garage with these 4 pretty creepy full paintings of 4 kids laughing.
Oh my God.
Like the whole garage door was 4 people's faces.
Reaching for
I'm
Google.
not gonna kid you. I was just thinking. I don't know why, but there was the one house I saw that was haunted. I don't know what made me think of it, but I thought of the painting of these kids they had just like literally 5 minutes ago.
Oh, weird.
That is so weird, but it was the most creepy painting I've ever seen. I don't know what made me think of that.
So the lore for this house was
Wild.
that those kids had drowned. I mean, the chances of 4 kids, whatever. I'm not buying it
I
now
mean,
as
that
an
lake
adult.
is laughing at something,
right.
and I think it's about how many children it's murdered.
It's eaten.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And then there was the night that they had allegedly died. If you drove down that lane, you would feel like you were going over a speed bump, which was their ghost bodies.
Oh my God.
Oh no!
I don't know why.
Is it 4 in a row?
Because they weren't hit by cars.
Right.
So
That's
I'm guessing this was, but people would go drive down
That's a
that
first
lane.
here on BCC. Ghost body speed bumps.
Yeah.
Wait, a house
yeah.
had a painting, 4 garage doors, and each one had a painting of
No,
the
it was
dead.
one big garage door.
Okay,
Wow.
I'm trying to find this right now.
That is so wild, though.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So that was like the only lore I have. But you know, St. Louis, it's like The Exorcist is St. Louis. And my mom was a docent at this house called the Dimonial Mansion, which was a historical landmark. It was very weird. It was
There's that raccoon again. Munching on some candy.
yeah, and it was very weird that they called it the mansion.
What if it turned out that you thought your mom could speak French? And that's just how she. You're like, oh, that's French. That's what my mom spoke French. That's how it sounds.
You know, my mom did speak French.
I think we're learning she did not.
I think so. It was called the Demonial Mansion, and it was next to another historic mansion. And it had, I don't remember, it was from the 1800s, and you could tour it and see how people back then lived in like wealthy St. Louis family. And there, of course, were ghost stories included there because it's just creepy and old and beautiful. But the mansion
Sounds like a perfect recipe.
the mansion next to it, which I'm spacing on what it's called, but you could easily find it if you Googled Demonial Mansion and then whatever.
Spelled
Spelled
M&M.
had this story about this family had a child who maybe was either physically disabled in some way or mentally, and he was kept in the attic.
God.
And they called him Monkey Boy.
Oh, no.
And you could see his face in the window, and people would take pictures, and you could see the outline of Monkey Boy in the window.
Maybe it was a chimpanzee, and that's why they thought.
No.
No.
Even a chimpanzee chained in the attic is
This whole
bad.
this whole
almost
family
worse.
was so plagued with travesty. It was like one of those things that it's a super wealthy old St. Louis family that just everything was awful for all of these people. And they treated, the way they treated the kid,
You're saying
obviously.
rich white people are
Jeez.
This is a
Can be assholes.
controversial take.
This sounds like
But-
almost like at Christmas when you have two houses competing for who has the best Christmas lights. I feel like these two mansions were competing for which could be creepier, and they're like, "Well,
Yeah.
we have a monkey boy."
Yeah, it's true. And then my last thing, sorry,
Oh no,
is as you know, my parents have croaked, and
so to speak.
So they are buried in this historic cemetery in St. Louis, and it's beautiful. It's called Bellefontaine Cemetery. It's in like a very unsafe neighborhood, but it has all of these tombstones from wherever, and just walking around it is so fascinating. And you're seeing, and there's a brochure with all of these historical people who were buried there. And this isn't paranormal, but it's just interesting. This Demonial Mansion made me think of it. Yum, yum, yum. Sorry, that's the last time I'll do it.
It's my fault. I started it.
This woman who was like touted the most beautiful woman in the country, or at least in St. Louis. She was in her early 20s, and she had the burden of beauty and then having to like live up to that. She started dosing herself with arsenic because it made your skin really pale. And that was the thing back then. And she killed herself by like her system built up so much arsenic. So she had to take more and more arsenic to remain as pale and beautiful as she needed to be to keep the throne of the most beautiful woman. And
This is like some grim fairy tale shit.
anyway, she died. She died when she was like 27, and she's buried there.
She's like, now I'm a ghost, the most pale I can be.
Most beautiful. But it made me, I was touring I was walking around the cemetery, and I was like, that's so fucked up. And then I was like, well, we like do Botox, the shit that like the Kardashians are putting their bodies through to look the way they look is so crazy.
No, it's a billion dollar business focusing on, people's, kind of low self-image or it's
Anyway.
a terrible thing.
Now, when your parents croaked, your words, not mine, how did whose decision was it for them to be in
To
this?
die?
Well,
I think it was
Jesus.
God's Michael.
To be in this Gothic cemetery. How did do you have more family there?
Well, no, I don't know actually. They bought a bunch of plots, so that's where I'm going to be.
Is that really?
Not to brag.
Really?
I mean, if I want to, I guess. I don't know.
I love that. We bought a bunch of plots, so we got one for you and your brother. And
I wonder if you can sell that real estate back and make a buck
you for
on
sure
it.
can. But it's very beautiful. It's overlooking this like little lake area with ducks and
Oh, okay.
it's very picturesque, and it's a beautiful historic cemetery. I don't know why they picked there, but I think that at the time that they died, we still were like really connected to St.
Right,
Louis.
of course.
So it made sense for them to be buried there. But now we have literally no connection to St. Louis, so it's a little strange that that's where they
All my family is buried in the same, like my mom's side of the family's all in the same cemetery.
Oh, that's
back
cool.
in Kansas City, but we're going there. Let's go here. I've thought like, I don't know if I'd want to be. I mean, on one hand, I'd be like, yeah, it'd be great to be with my relatives. But on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know if I want to be buried in Kansas City. I might be like, I'd like to maybe have a burial at sea out in California or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
you're more of a forest lawn guy.
Yeah.
I think I'd rather be like scattered somewhere
Well,
like the redwood forest.
Yeah.
They do that
I
thing
mean,
now.
not cremated, just scattered. Just chop me up and throw my.
Well,
Just chop them up.
those mountain lions will come back and get you.
Yeah, circle of life.
I do think they have those like tree pods now. There are
those
all
are
these
great.
cool ways
That's
to
what
be.
I
That's what I
want.
was going to say
Yeah.
that.
One of those little like fetal tree pods.
Then
Yeah.
you worry
Awesome.
about what if my tree's the one that
It's
died?
like a
Then they
year-old
could put
tree,
that
right?
tree.
And then they put the ashes within the soil of the tree, and you can actually plant the tree.
Yes.
And so then this tree becomes a living monument of your life. I think that's a great
Tree
idea
me.
too.
You can also be incorporated into coral. Like they make a thing that coral will then grow on. So, I don't know. They can do so many things with ashes these days.
I know.
You can get turned into a diamond.
That's
I have
Yes,
a friend.
I've
he,
heard
he
that.
and his wife, they're going to get turned into a diamond together.
Right.
Eventually.
So that
It's pretty cool.
At the heart
That
of
is
a
pretty
star.
Yeah.
that's interesting. that
I'm gonna be
presumes
a
a lot of
comet.
stuff. They have to die around the same time.
Well, I mean, I
or-
think you would just keep the ashes of the one until the other.
and then the new wife's like,
And then what if the, yeah.
okay,
What if the kids like?
can I get in on this time?
But then the
You know
kids
what?
are
They're-
like,
they're young. It's a romantic thought. Just let them have it.
yeah.
I won't let this
Just
go.
give it to them. Life will beat them down.
We'll settle
not
for
letting
cubic
this one
zirconia.
slide.
Fine.
Gosh.
But yeah, I think I would like to be someplace like I like the Redwoods idea where my kids could go and
Right.
think of me and have a nice experience.
Yeah,
you
feel
know?
your presence as opposed to visiting a plot, perhaps. you
Yeah.
know?
Riley, I would like you to encase my corpse in glass and hang it on the wall of the studio.
Done.
That's cool.
But you have to promise to haunt it.
Well, you know, there's,
Oh, for sure.
there's that thing in science where it's like a lot of people are getting pretty creative with their remains now, but you know, maybe what's to say in 100 years that they wouldn't be able to take some of your bone marrow from your grave and perhaps bring you back to life, you know? And so it kind of eliminates that option when you
You're
go.
talking
Bryce?
clone situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what, you know, as opposed to like going completely cremated where you're just dust. Let's say like in 200 years or something, we had the science wherewithal to actually like bring you back or something. I'm only saying this because my wife immediately was
I'm
like,
into it.
She
Yeah,
signed
why
us up
not?
to her as like, we're getting cremated. I was like, well, I don't know if that's what I want. She's like, well, I
like
already signed us up.
cryogenics.
Just like say like a
Cryogenics.
femur.
Or just
some
have your DNA
cryogenics.
saved so they could clone you and
But
download
what
your
if they need some
consciousness into
deep bone marrow? Let's, you know, what if they need more than just,
I don't
you
know that marrow lasts.
Yeah.
You'd have to freeze it.
Well, I mean, yeah, but they'd be able to pull from your,
Maybe put you in amber like Jurassic Park
yeah,
style.
right,
Yeah.
totally.
Ooh, encased in amber. There's a place.
I'm just saying you're eliminating your options.
I
if
know
you-
it's true. It's true. Cremation. I was worried about that too. If you were like, you know, you grew up pretty religious. Your folks were religious, right? Correct. Your mom was
Yeah.
Catholic.
My dad was Catholic.
My dad was Catholic too. My mom was Presbyterian.
My mom was
But my dad was
Methodist and then
lapsed.
changed to a Catholic just
Okay.
to, you know, make it look
Spice
good on
it up.
paper. Yeah.
I always used to be like, but if you're cremated, then you can't rise from the grave like a zombie on
That's what I'm
Judgment
talking
Day.
about.
But I also there's a place in Kansas City, not Kansas City, in Kansas, out on 70 freeway, off the 70, called the Garden of Eden, which is this artist created this giant concrete sculpture garden, sort of like a lower rent Coral Castle. And you can go, he buried himself. The wife put him there in glass. You can go see his glass tomb and see the waxy corpse of the artist there. It's like a really cool.
Wow.
That's
See, that
kind of a
stuff's
cool way to
fun.
do it, you
That's
know?
fun.
I saw Chairman Mao in China. He's in a glass.
Yeah, Lenin's
case.
in glass
wow.
too, isn't
Right.
he?
Pretty wild. Yeah.
So maybe this guy was also a communist. I don't know.
What do you guys think ghosts are?
Great question.
Excellent
Well,
question.
you know what? Let's ask you first. Let's throw that right back in your face. What do you think ghosts are?
Oof. I don't know because I don't know that I just don't love the idea of a soul or spirit getting stuck and like
Right.
not knowing what's going on. I kind of think that that's the deal. Like
Yes.
we're all idiots here and
Yeah.
then you move on to what's next and you like know what the deal is.
Right.
A soul's purgatory, so to speak.
Yeah, so I don't love that and I don't know. I think that possibly like our limited understanding of space and time is so big that
Speaking our language, baby.
that's like a glitch
Yeah.
that actually the soul has moved on, but this is like some weird
Well, you know,
thing.
when you were saying your stories, I mean, I think there's power in such emotive pain, like storing your kid up in an attic or like a whole family of young people drowning. This is such an emotional, psychological trauma. And, you know, we often say around here that, you know, psyche is directly related to matter. And, you know, and whatever that means, and I don't think we have a good understanding of what time and space is. So I think some of these pains,
I mean, I
these
think we have a good
traumas can.
understanding of what time and space is.
Well, I know. I'm saying
but beyond.
Well,
time and
I
space.
might argue against that, you know, and
Okay.
but what I was saying is that some of these
I mean,
things
I
can,
certainly don't.
can
but
leave an energetic resonance. You know what I mean?
Yes. Interesting.
And that it can stay behind in some
imprints.
whether it's and it makes an imprint on this space kind of time field, whatever it is, this morphic field that we're all a part of. You know,
I think like a lot of this stuff, there's more than one answer. So I think you have a couple different classifications, and I think they all tend to get lumped in as ghosts. So I think there are there are your basic run-of-the-mill ghosts that are souls that have not figured out how to move on. If they are scared of judgment on the other side of the tunnel, or the tunnel of light, that they're scared because of something they did here or something they didn't do, had left to do, they have not moved on and they've become stuck and don't know. So I think there is that. Maybe some of them don't even know they're dead. Then I think that there are what they call like, so those are like resident ghosts. Those are ones that are hanging around in residency on this plane. Then I think there are ones that are visitors, that they're ones that have moved on and they come back and pop back in.
Relay a message.
And to relay a message or visit, but they're not stuck here, that they can kind of bounce in and out of the afterlife and here. Then I think there's a third classification that are where you get your poltergeist. Well, sometimes they say poltergeist or telekinesis, but I think there are some maybe like
malevolent
spirits or extra dimensional entities that are moving shit around. And then you can get into like shadow people and weird energy and all that stuff that were never human to begin with, that may interact, that some people would call like, oh, well, those are what demons are, but maybe they aren't necessarily technically like demons from hell, that kind of stuff. They're just from a different wavelength, from a higher or lower dimension. And then I think you have your imprints, your energy imprints, like you say, where sometimes something so traumatic happens where there's echoes throughout our linear time stream that it'll ripple. You'll suddenly see like a woman standing in the room screaming, you know, who you knew had been murdered there, and sometimes that just appears like a thumbprint throughout time. And if you're at that moment to catch it, you see it, and you might go, "Oh my God, her ghost appeared."
Right.
When that might be just sort of this resonant of really, you know,
Sure.
Those
were great classifications. And by the way, but you know, going back to like what we do with our bodies after we die. You know, and the reason I was thinking that is because, you know, the Egyptians were fascinated with what happened to us after death. And part of their mummification process, embalming themselves and their organs, were almost as, so to speak, to fool, you know, the underworld, so that they could stay around almost ad infinitum, that they wouldn't be chucked back into to sort of reincarnation or back into the source of one.
Right.
You know, it was almost a way of maintaining their physical presence, you know, on Earth, fooling, you know, the underworld, by having those so-called spirits say, oh, they're still there. Look at them. You know, they haven't moved on. There's their organs. There's their body. You know, so they felt it was almost sacrilege to do, you know, for cremation today for them would be just a heresy, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm like, this is my whole thing, is what happens to us after, and what do people think? I mean, I asked perfect strangers this question, and I know that no one knows is the thing, but yet I still want someone to convince me that they know.
Yeah.
But I've had messages sent to me, not via apparition, but things that feel pretty undeniable to me, and, you know, kind of make me feel like there is something bigger, or there's something beyond this. And I think we're the dum-dums, and I also think we like take everything way too seriously. And I think this is like a weird just moment for
I often think
ourselves.
about it as like that our lives, our existence, and the reality that we live in here on Earth within this universal time-space structure, it is almost like a very and I think maybe you've touched upon this in Totally Married a little bit, maybe, but it is almost like a complex, not what's the word? It's not an experiment necessarily, but it is almost like when you play a video game where and we're getting there close. We've talked about like virtual reality, where the game player is controlling it, but when you play a video game, you can lose yourself in that game. You're in
an avatar's experience.
Yeah, and I think that maybe what we are is our bodies are avatars for this reality, for souls that come from a higher dimension, consciousness that comes from a higher dimension.
Yeah.
And that when we are born into these flesh,
Flesh houses.
yeah, meat
Flesh
suits,
suit.
meat suits, and we are diving down into the third dimension, and with that comes all the rules of experiencing the third dimension, which is pain, suffering, pleasure, ecstasy, creation, destruction, all of it. And sort of the choice that we make, if there's a choice, and I tend to think that our consciousness maybe does precede our existence here on Earth, that we go, I'm going in, and part of what happens when you drop down into the third dimension in your meat suit and you're shot out of your mother's womb, you forget. Because of the fact that we're dropping into a lower dimension from a higher dimension, you forget where you come from. And that's part of the experience. And it's no different to me than when it's a richer, far more complex, far more mysterious version of like losing yourself in a book, losing yourself in a film or a video game. And I think that what happens is whenever this ends, we are shot back up we wake back up in that higher dimension that we came from.
Wouldn't that be nice?
And we're like, oh, fuck, right. Oh, hey,
Yeah,
Elizabeth,
I do
there
think
you
that.
are.
I think
And
I like
then-
that, Michael.
You know what I mean? And then you can go, and because time and space is different, and when we talk about eternity, when they say that the eternal life, well, that exists outside of space-time. So it's like a thing where when you, quote unquote, when you die and you go to the afterlife, everyone, they say everyone you ever know or loved is there. They're all in that realm, like whether they're alive or dead yet here on Earth, like, oh, there's my daughter, there's my son, and they're here too. They've always been here.
Oh, I
We've
love
always
that.
been here. That's kind of what the ending of Lost was really about. And then you can go,
Oh,
you
boy.
can go. Well, sorry,
You lost her.
Now I lost people, but so to speak. But you could turn to Andy and go, hey, do you want to jump back down in there this time? How about you be grandma and I'll be grandpa, or you know what I mean?
Right.
And you can go, hey, you know what? Let's go experience what it's like to be a settler on the Oregon Trail. That's gonna suck. Yeah, but fuck it. We've got all of eternity. Let's do this. How else are we going to experience what this is?
That's giving
That's
our soul a
fascinating.
lot of rope to work with, I got to tell you.
Yeah, and I think that there's something that comes from it. I think it feeds our consciousness, it feeds our soul, it feeds our empathy. But I think that the risk you take when you do this is you can lose yourself in it. And I think that we need to constantly remind ourselves, guys, this, like you said, this isn't it. This isn't all of it. And it's tough. And I think that when we go, then you get into some really however, this model, you get into some really complex moral quandaries, which I think we don't understand necessarily. Because if this model is true, then does that mean that it's okay to be a serial killer, for example, where you're just running through the simulation, killing people and causing harm and destruction? I don't think so. I think that that's damaging. Because I think wherever we come from is real, but this is also real. And I think the lesson here is to learn love, kindness, empathy.
Joseph Campbell asked that same question to this guru in India, and he brought up that same point. He said, listen, if this is all just for us here as experiential, why can't I just do whatever I want? And the guru said to him, for you and I, we choose different.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. It's like,
then that gets all back
you and
in-
I and Elizabeth, we choose not to be serial killers. And Riley,
but
we're
it brings-
not
it-
sure.
Riley is a question mark, honestly.
But that's a good point, and that actually doesn't. If you're a religious person from a Christian upbringing, at least, and I'm sure this is similar in other religions. I grew up, like we said, Presbyterian. But that's, you hear about God's will, like God granted us free will to make these choices, right? So it kind of feeds back into that it doesn't contradict that this is a simulation, that we are given room to do whatever we want. And you're right, we choose not to do that because it is harmful and it's destructive and it does cause pain. Now, what the punishment is for that afterwards, I don't know. Does it diminish the consciousness? Is it possible that if you come down here in this reality and you choose to be a fucking monster,
well,
it's possible that it could eradicate your soul and consciousness, and that you may not be able to return back to where we came from?
Yeah.
Some would argue that we need.
I don't know. These are the big questions.
Some would
Liz,
argue that we need the dark to experience the light. You know, so many people say, well, what about Hitler? Would he go to heaven, or would he get to experience that? And and some would say that, like, hey, if we don't acknowledge and recognize, the dark that's in this world, we can never experience the opposite of that.
Well, yeah.
And so, how can you know what's good if you've never experienced or had the recognition of what is evil? We need both. There's a balance. There's yin and yang here.
Was Hitler a real person, or was he, in this scenario, or was he like a computer program? Was he a CPU? Was he part of the program that was challenging us?
You're really going into the simulation.
You know what I mean? I mean, maybe when some people go, there was no soul, he was soulless. Maybe there are humans that we encounter in this simulation that are they're part of the program and aren't like us.
I think that could be, and I think something horrible happened to him.
Yeah, you don't want to take away
at
from
some point in time when he was young, probably, and that whatever damage was done, maybe his soul moved on or whatever. I was sitting next to this old guy on an airplane.
Yeah, because you don't want to take away the accountability for what he did as a human being.
No.
So I know this is all difficult
dicey
stuff.
Yeah. I was sitting on a plane next to this older guy who happens to be an actor. We were talking, and he had, I don't know, all these wild stories and all this great wisdom, and he was very Christian. And I just found that interesting because he's been in Hollywood for a long time, and you don't encounter that many like true blue Christian dudes. And I was like, when I just think about all of this horrible stuff in the world, and so much of it is actually created by religion, and like, how do you justify that there is this God who is like all powerful and then allows that? And he was like, well, now this is like I don't know what I think about this, but it's interesting to me. He said, it's said in my mind, the angels, not that they have jealousy or envy, but they look upon a human's experience with kind of a nostalgia, because humans have the power and freedom of choice. Where angels are, there's no choice. Everything just is. And where humans are, there's choice, and there is only choice because there is evil. Like what you're saying, the light and the dark the light can't exist without the dark, and choice doesn't exist. And I think that there is, of course, in the Christian mindset, it's like you're trying to achieve something in order to be with God.
Lean to the light. Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought that was interesting. Like,
and light to meet it.
Yeah. So you're God.
No, yeah.
Supreme Leader Snoke.
Well, I got a brain teaser on this topic.
That is fascinating, though, and that's real quick. That's why supposedly Lucifer rebelled, the Lightbringer, because he was like, well, I want choice. I want that free will that I think I'm paraphrasing.
He was God's favorite angel.
He was God's favorite angel, and he was like. And Lucifer and Satan are not necessarily the same entity. That was sort of, they were compressed over time.
I think you've got it wrong. What happened is
probably
God,
Lucifer was watching.
No, God created man, and God said, "This is my most magnificent creation. I want all the angels to worship man." And Lucifer said, "I can't do it.
I worship you. Yeah,
I worship you. You're the most amazing creation there is. You're God. How could you have me worship man? I won't do it." And so he was cast out of heaven, and he took, I think that's more
He
along.
took a left-hand turn on
He took a
Mulholland.
left-hand
He
turn.
went down.
And he said, I won't do it. I won't worship man over God, over you, my creator. I can't do it.
That's right.
And so he was
right.
banished, along with his, and he took a squad with him, and his, and away they went, What were you going to say, Riley?
Well, so building
And now
on
we
this whole...
have pornography.
Thanks, Lucifer. So, okay, on this whole idea, assuming that we eventually work out the way to digitally preserve consciousness, so in that case,
That's a big assumption, but
I think that we will do
yeah,
it personally.
I'm with you.
But assuming we do down the line, if you then choose to do that and not die, are you trapping yourself in this
Possibly.
realm?
Yeah.
Or are you transcending death?
Well,
this
goes into the law of like battling nature and the law of nature. Or let's say this: what if this reality is started? What if this is a byproduct of a species or of people or humanoids or whatever that learned how to do that eons ago, and we're a simulation within a simulation within a simulation within a simulation within a simulation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And maybe we're just perpetuating it going in infinity.
Yeah.
That's no good.
That's what
Because we could eventually
Look at these different Riley's like, yes. And I'm like,
and she's
no.
like, I know. All right. Well, we should take a quick break, and when we come back, I think it's time for High Strangeness.
Yeah, that was some deep shit. That was fun, though. High Strangeness up next.
Hey everyone, this is Riley. I wanted to let you know we've launched our Patreon page. It's a place where listeners can help support the show and gain access to exclusive bonus content. For $5 a month, our Patreon members get special episodes like our campfire stories, movie club, and Out There episodes, where we explore our own little place in the cosmos. We also post behind-the-scenes conversations that happen during the breaks and all sorts of other bonuses. We put a lot of love into these episodes, and we make a lot of them. They're a deeper level of the show where we expand on ideas and concepts from our main feed. Our weekly show will of course always remain free, but for $5 a month, our Patreon members will gain full access to the inner sanctum of the BCC. We hope you'll join us there. That's patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub. And thanks for listening.
All right, and we're back with my episode of High Strangeness this week. Pretty excited. Going to shift the gear topics here a little bit and head back to
gear topics.
Yeah, that's
You shift the gear on the topics, or just the
Yeah.
gear topics?
No, gear topics.
Dude,
This is
my
gear
specific.
topics.
I'm shifting my gear
Physical
topics,
Hey
bruh.
guys, make sure you tune in to over the Patreon page for Bryce's motorcycle show, Gear Topics.
I host it with Matt LeBlanc. It's awesome. All right, so this is the what's called the Falcon Lake Incident.
Lots of lake incidents today.
Yeah. Now this is Canada's most evidential case. So they, I wanted to
lakes.
no of a UFO landing. I wanted to bring in something.
Now, Liz.
Yeah.
May I call you Liz?
Sure.
Elizabeth. That was a no.
You can call me whatever you want, Michael.
Ms. Lame. You were into UFOs. You're interested in UFOs.
I am.
Okay,
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I think then you'll like this one. So I wanted to bring in something with a lot of physical and trace evidence, and that's why I brought in this one. So by far the most evidential case to ever been reported in Canada is that of Stephen Michalak in what is simply known as the Falcon Lake Incident. Now, Stephen was an industrial mechanic by trade and an amateur geologist who liked to venture out into the wilderness around Falcon Lake, which is just east of Winnipeg, to do some prospecting for quartz and things like that. On May 20th...
Like Albert Ostman.
Yes, exactly. On May 20th, 1967...
He was kidnapped by Bigfoot.
He was in case you didn't know. So on May 20th, 1967, Stephen was near a vein of quartz when the 51-year-old was startled by a gaggle of nearby geese that erupted into a clattering of honks. So Stephen looks up, and what he saw was two cigar-shaped objects with an intense reddish glow hovering about 45 meters away. I'm using meters out of respect to Canada.
Spelled R-E.
Okay. One of the craft began. We had to redo that joke, but it was much better the second time. One of the craft began descending, and it landed on a flat section of rock, and it subsequently took on more of a disc shape. Now, the other remained in the air for a few minutes before brilliantly changing colors and silently flying off. Believing it to be a secret U.S. military experimental craft, Stephen grabbed his notepad and sketched as many details as possible over the next half hour. Then he decided to approach, recalling a smell of sulfur as he got closer, as well as a whirring sound of motors and a hissing of warm air. A door suddenly opened on the side of the craft where he could see lights coming from the inside. As he approached, he heard two human-like voices coming from the inside, one higher pitched than the other. He called out, and I know, and I was going to do the door swish too. Shh.
You guys, I add that in later.
Oh, right. Sorry, Riley. That's your job. I don't want to step on your toes here. So he calls out to this spacecraft, offering mechanical assistance to the Yankee pilots to see if they needed help.
There. Hey,
Now,
I was waiting. How long are we going to get through the story before someone does a bad Canadian accent?
right. Hey there, you need help, eh? Sorry. So the voices then went quiet. He asked again in Russian, "Do you speak Russian?" Still no response.
this guy's been hiding his Russian?
Yeah, and he speaks German, Italian, and
God,
French,
this
and
guy's so he's a
finally
smarty pants.
Ukrainian. So he asked in all these different
Guy, a protocol droid?
This
Dude.
amateur geologist in the middle of buttfuck Canada
yeah.
speaks 17 languages.
Yeah, these aliens, I mean, these Canadians know their
Marry
shit.
me.
Now, Mitchell, being the brave man that he was, he approached even closer, so close that the light became unbearable. So he pushed down the tinted green lenses on his goggles and peered inside when he saw a maze of light beams and panels of various colored lights flashing in sequence, but did not see anyone or any living thing. Stepping back, 3 panels slid across the door opening and sealed it close. Oh, this is where I have make sound effects. There you go. The door closes.
Gotcha.
So Michalak begins to examine the side of the craft with his gloved hand.
Did your notes say
Yeah, it says-
make sound effects?
Right there, make sound effects. He could see no indication of welding or joints, and the surface was highly polished, appearing like colored glass reflecting light. When he pulled his hand back, he found that his glove had burned and melted, as had his hat.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's hot.
Ha. Oh,
Now, the
hey
craft,
there.
or at least the rim, then seemed to change position, for he found himself facing a grid-type exhaust vent, which he had noticed earlier to the left of the opening.
Oh, would you look at that?
A blast of hot air.
More leprechaun here,
He's
really.
not a leprechaun, brah. A blast of hot air or gas then struck his chest, setting his shirt and vest on fire and causing severe pain.
Oh, yeah, that's smarts.
He ripped away the burning garments and looked up to see the craft taking off just like the first object as he felt a rush of hot air. And I got a
So he's
picture.
still on the outside of the craft
Yeah,
at
I got
this
a
point?
picture here for you I want to share. This is his sketch drawing. And there he is. Disoriented and nauseous, Stephen stumbled through the forest and vomited, but not before putting out the small fire his burning clothes had left behind.
Jeez.
Hiking back to where he had originally entered the woods, a passing RCMP officer, which is Royal Canadian Mounted Police, stopped in his car, and I love this, listened to his story, and then left, explaining that he had other duties to perform. I
Wow.
love that, right?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that sounds great, but listen, there's I got to check
There's
on
a
these.
moose on the loose. I gotta go shoot
Now,
it.
Stephen eventually made his way back to his motel room in Falcon Lake and then caught a bus back to Winnipeg. He was treated at a hospital for burns to his chest, which you can see on that picture, and stomach, that later turned into raised sores on a grid-like pattern. And for weeks afterward, he suffered from diarrhea, headaches, blackouts, and weight loss. Now, so this is physical
What is your
evidence
secret?
left on his body. I'll show you that, Riley. And there's his sketch of the craft that he apparently approached. Now, according to Michalak, he says this whole thing really just flipped our lives over. Once the story was out, the RCMP, the Air Force, the media, various government agencies, and hordes of gawking members of the public descended on the Michalak Small River Heights bungalow in Winnipeg. It just flipped our lives over, he said. It took several years before it finally died down. And after that, until the day he died in 1999 at the age of 83, Stephen believed he never should have said a thing. You know, I wanted to bring this up to just to, going back to your story about like, well, Mike, you wanted to see this thing, you wanted to experience this in your life. And here's a case where I say, no, that's absolutely wrong. These people who experience this, these traumatic events in their life, they really, in more or less words, they really don't want any part of it. I mean, it really just upturns their whole life.
Well, and it's just fascinating. Like he says, we never should have said anything. It makes me think about all the tales like this.
Yeah.
Of people who, again, don't say anything because they don't want the attention. They don't want the stigma that comes along with it, that this person is looking for money or fame or are crazy.
And we've done the numbers before. I mean, all the UFO.
I have the calculator in my pocket.
Of all the cases that we get to review, those are usually 1 in 5. I mean, the 1 in 5 go reported. So that's, you're leaving out about, 90% of these cases go unreported. Anyway, I don't think that math's right.
1 in 5,
anyway,
90%.
I would love someone to make the science book based on this podcast, and it's just garbage.
But hey, this is the Bigfoot Collectors Club. We're just a couple armchair cryptos enthusiasts here, so we're just shooting from the hip most of the time. But the reason why he did come forward is because he felt it was his duty. He wanted others, if they were to see the same thing, to avoid it and not get hurt, Michalak said. In Poland, before Stephen moved his family to Canada, he was a military policeman with a set of moral guidelines that he lived by. That is, if something happened, it should be reported, Michalak said. Now, in addition to constant probing from authorities, the family endured condemnation and criticism in the public. Stephen's sanity was questioned, and though he wished he hadn't said anything, Stephen never backed away from the story either. He also never claimed to have seen aliens and still considered it a secret military craft. If you asked him what it was he saw, he could describe it in intimate detail, but he would never say, oh, it was definitely extraterrestrials.
Exactly. I make this point all the time.
Because there was no evidence to prove that.
Yeah.
Now, he might ask...
You can point to and be like, it looked like what we call a UFO or flying saucer. Doesn't mean it was from another planet. Yeah. But it's still fucking crazy.
Yeah. Right up until he died, his story never changed one iota. Nothing about it or how he told it. Now, in all those years since, and with some 300 pages of documentation on the counter, there's nothing so far that has flawed his story. So when asked what he thought, he said, I'm not so close-minded that I can't entertain the possibility that it's otherworldly. I can't discount that. But without specific evidence to show me that it is, I don't know, Michalak said. What I can tell you is that I'm an aviation fanatic, a huge aviation buff, and I'm very familiar with how aviation technology has advanced in the past 50 years. And there was nothing even close to that in the works anytime around. So that's the case of the Falcon Lake incident.
Interesting.
And as you can see, I mean, his medical conditions, I didn't go all into it, but he lost 22 pounds. And they sent tests to radiologists all across Canada and America, and they found it similar, some of those findings of what it would be like it being exposed to extreme gamma radiation. So this isn't just, this isn't just like him, marking up his body. He was blasted with this hot, air, whatever it was, sulfuric air. And as you could see on his sketch, if you're listening, just Google Falcon Lake Incident.
It'll be on our Instagram.
And we'll put them up on our social media page. But in his drawing right there, you can see the vents. But it's a fascinating case. And not only that, the case was intensely investigated by a number of levels of government. And the official conclusion, even from the United States Air Force, was that the case was unexplained. Now here's another.
Was that through the Freedom of Information Act? Where was that?
I'm not sure. This is from a book on a guy named Rutowski, and that his son compiled together. Now here's what's really interesting. Items were later retrieved from the encounter site. They went back about a year later, including this was before Stefan's glove and shirt,
and they found a cute little alien with a speak and say.
Right. No.
And a pot and a sunflower in a
Mike,
pot.
I love Michael always
Yeah,
throws
not
me
bad.
off my story. No, it
It's
wasn't
fun.
that. So at the they went back to the landing site and there
I
was
like
a circle.
getting Grandpa Bryce confused.
Stop! I'm trying to tell this story
You
now.
kids?
You darn kids are always getting me all confused.
Where's your cane?
So they go back and they find a 15 feet burn mark in diameter, devoid of the moss and vegetation growing, which is very common in a lot of like UFO landing cases. Soil samples were taken along with samples of his clothing were tested and deemed to be highly radioactive. Now here's where it gets interesting. About a year later, investigators went back
Finally.
and they found pieces of metal that were chipped out of cracks into the rock about a year after the incident. Now, the metal had somehow been melted into the cracks of the rock. It was in the shape of a W. Many of the items have long since been lost as they were transferred through various authorities and agencies. However, Rutowski and Michalak's son still have one of the pieces of metal, which remains radioactive.
Wow.
And that's the story. So there's lots of...
I hadn't heard this one. That's
Yeah,
cool.
so
Or
that's
if I
a good
had,
one.
I have forgotten it.
yeah,
A mountain of evidence.
Wow.
mountain of
A very
evidence.
credible witness.
Sure.
Okay, well, when we come back, you know what time it is.
It's time for Elizabeth to explain what the hell was that. And we're back. So
It's time for
Yo.
What the Hell Was That?
yeah, Liz, what do you make of all this? This Stephen Michalak, ex-military policeman who experienced a landed UFO and went up to go check it out.
Well, first of all, my first instinct is that, I wish there had been someone else there because I think a lot can happen to your brain given like he's near a quarry. We don't know
There
we
could be
don't
some,
know
like,
what
natural
is going on with the
gases that
earth.
are-
Yes,
Yeah.
like I think that it is very possible, and he has this military training that like maybe he was flashing back to something. I don't know. Then you get into the radiation stuff at the end, and I'm like, that. I don't not believe that his experience is real, but I also, because it was just him, I'm also like, it is also possible that this was something that happened to his brain, that
if
he
he-
blacked out.
You
or
make a valid point.
I mean,
yeah.
if he'd been blasted with something that made him that ill, then it could have also affected his memory of the event.
Right. So those are the options to me. And I also wanted to say, given the like radiation and stuff, I don't think this is the case. But when, however long ago it was, I was driving home. My daughter Teddy's in the car. She's facing backwards. It was in December. And all the Christmas lights were up. And she was like, Mommy, I see a rocket ship that's going to space. And I was like, oh, ha, 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 or whatever. That's cool. And we kept going. She kept talking about it. Didn't stop. We're driving for blocks. And I finally get out. And I get out of the car and I look up and it's the Falcon X
The SpaceX,
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
that I was like, and all of our neighbors are outside looking up. I have like it. I literally was like, here it is.
That's a great case study. Yeah.
Here it is. This is happening. And of course I was like, honey, you weren't wrong. Like
Right.
there's,
Yeah.
and I screamed for Andy to come out. Everyone's filming it.
Riley called me immediately.
Yeah, it was.
I was really like,
I was in
and
Hollywood. The whole city stopped. Everyone was just.
it wasn't even, it's not like what's this weird shaped thing. The way it was glowing was otherworldly.
It looked almost like a biological entity in the
was
sky.
Yes, it looked like a huge
jellyfish.
sea.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
exactly. And
totally
the
thought the same
glowing it
thing.
did. I mean, my mind was blown. And of course, within 5 minutes online, it's like everyone's throwing out around Falcon X like we knew
Yeah.
what the fuck this was. But I feel like 50 years ago, had this happened, all of these people who saw this, who couldn't figure out what it was or whatever, would have just been like, I saw a UFO.
Right.
And there's no, I
But-
would have been like, I saw a UFO.
But there's a difference between what you described,
Yes.
even without Twitter,
Yeah.
and somebody saying that they approached a physical craft that landed, that they witnessed for a half hour before he approached.
Yes, for sure.
Now, we're taking his word for it, obviously. But at what point do we just say, well, we're going to ignore this because of what you're saying it is? We're going to ignore. I mean, at some point we have to go.
Like
okay,
that RCMP officer who was like, that sounds great, buddy, but listen.
Yeah. I mean, at some
That's
point,
another thing. Why the officer would leave someone who had just had his clothes on fire?
Yeah, that was weird.
And had this. I don't doubt that he experienced this.
Maybe he would have thought, he could have, like, people, just some person coming out of the woods disoriented and like, oh, this, happens a lot. These people that are, I mean, I don't know.
And did that man, I mean, did they ever track down that officer?
I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting part of the story.
It's super interesting, but it almost makes me feel like it's a little easier to discount, like the way I'm hearing the story. And again, I think that he thinks it's very true to him, and I think it probably felt very real. I don't know if I believe anymore that it was this ship that came and the experience happened in real time and space versus like something that happened to him in his head.
It's just funny that we hear stories like this, and because they are so unbelievable, we will just discount. It's very easy to discount. I mean, if this guy were to be like, I saw something, like I saw, I don't know, a bear or something. We're like, of course you did. You know what I mean? And he could just be as easily lying about seeing a bear or hunting a bear. I mean, I don't know. I mean, people can lie about anything. It's just funny that we tend to, and I'm trying to grasp to put this thought together. It's just funny that we'll just, and I'm not putting this on you, Elizabeth. I mean, this is true with each one of these cases in terms of just being a skeptic, because it's so outlandish. We just go, no. But at what point can we go, well, we should take this guy's word for it and what he saw.
That's why I wanted to bring
and
this one in.
his ability to explain what he saw.
I think when there's two people.
Yeah. I mean,
to me,
and we've had those cases. We've had those
Yeah.
cases too, and those cases are just crazy.
That's a good point. It brings back to what
crazy
you were
in lore
saying.
as well. And but that's why I wanted to bring this one in, is because, I mean, looking at those grid marks left on his body, the investigators going back and finding a 15-foot circle of diameter of burn debris from like what you would describe a UFO taking off and leaving the vegetation burned below. That's not something...
Scorch marks.
Scorch marks. That's something very common within a lot of UFO landings. And
towards the end, I'm like, okay.
These things are tough because, look, there's arguable physical evidence. Period. That's what's going to keep the story credible. But it's also tough when we're sitting here and we're looking at black and white photographs and so much time has passed. It's very easy to write it off, or it's very easy to go, well, it must have happened because it's in a book. The thing that sucks about a lot of these incidents is they're so far away from us in time now. A lot of these that we can't. It's difficult to go, no. You know what I mean?
What's first caught me reading and researching this story, and it happens for everybody kind of seems to latch onto something. That seems a little weird. What for me was like sketching it for a half hour. The first thing he did, I was like, that's strange. Like a UFO lands and you take out your pen and notepad. I guess if he was an aviation buff, but to sketch it, just a landing craft for a half an hour. And, he says that it changed shape. It went from a cigar to more of the disc shape that he sees in the sketching. And I thought that was strange to, like, spend that much time. But maybe that was really smart as an eyewitness to, like, take the time to sketch that. But I felt that strange, too. It's weird.
And
I think clearly he had a methodical brain. I mean, he knew all these languages. I mean, I don't know. There's something about the way this guy...
The fact that he is an aviation expert also, and that he does speak all of these languages, unless whatever it was targeted him for some reason because of this.
Yeah.
Like all of it, it is kind of like, but I mean, if there's physical evidence there, I don't believe it.
Follow that thought through. Are you saying that maybe this is him making it up and sort of being like designing his own UFO in
I don't
his
think
imagination?
he's making it up. I'm wondering if this was like some sort of psychotic break, some sort of something happened in the earth.
Matter. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
whatever
listen,
that scorch thing was, maybe there was some sort of like weird chemical reaction with something right there.
We often talk on the show that we feel like sometimes these incidents require a witness. It's almost like whatever this energy is that is the UFO. Let's say it's not literally a spaceship. Let's just say it's a conscious
projection,
a higher consciousness trying to connect with this guy who's out in the woods, right? And perhaps there's something that this amorphous consciousness that's coming through from a different dimension is able to tap into something about this guy's imagination that goes, oh, will appear as a ship because he has this stuff. And then it requires the user, in other words, to physically manifest itself and then be able to engage with the guy. Let's say 1,000 years ago, and it were a knight on his horse, maybe the entity would manifest itself as a dragon instead of a UFO in order to engage with it, right? So there's that as well. Maybe it's both. Maybe it is a type of psychotic break, which also happens to be a form of communication with a higher intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're not far off. You're not far off theoretically. Coming up with something for this, because what's so interesting about a lot of these cases is no one seems to know. I mean, a lot of people like to latch on to, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which these are actual living beings from a different star system that have come down to visit and land their UFO right next to Stephen
I don't think that
Michalak.
We should count that out as a possibility,
right? But I don't think that's the case here.
Even if the case was this isn't.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And listen, Carl Jung in the late...
You don't think this was a UFO from outer space?
Oh, I definitely think it was a UFO.
Do you think it came from another planet?
I don't think it was extraterrestrial. No, I think it...
Do you think it's military?
No, absolutely not. I don't know what it is,
You
Michael.
think it's closer to what we were just
listen,
describing?
it said he looked in the craft, right? And he heard voices. He heard human-like voices. So obviously something's, like you said, playing with his... Either it's like a psycho breakdown or something. He looks inside the craft. He gets a good look in the craft with his goggles. So he's able to peer inside the entire craft into what only he sees as zigzag light beams and sequencing light flashes. Nothing living.
Right.
So then automatically whatever's speaking is gone. And, I don't know. Carl Jung, and later in his life, he was fascinated with a lot of his case studies in flying saucers, and he believed that people's psyche were directly related to matter, and that it can confluence. And so maybe you're right. Maybe there's this and I like to add on to your theory too. Maybe there's this higher conscientious being, intelligence that wants to get this story out there.
I thought maybe that because we just come off the heels of the simulation, that maybe like when you're playing a video game and they have to come in and they have to patch the program and write new code to fix a glitch.
Right.
Maybe some of these UFOs are sort of like the game makers or the programmers dropping into the program.
Let's test out the software.
And they're fixing some shit, and when in the manifestation of that action looks like something like a flying saucer, you know what I mean? But we can't understand what it's doing.
Well, and another weird point too is I think those marks returned every year on the year. So it wasn't like they just went away. They would actually come back.
Ugh. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, so it was very strange. But
wow. Falcon Lake Incident.
The Falcon Lake Incident, yeah.
Well, this is awesome. Thank you, Bryce.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, that
was great.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us to the close of another Clubhouse.
And I've noticed we never really get down to what the hell was that.
No,
we never,
I mean, we
that's
don't
sort
know.
of the point.
That's sort of the point.
Yeah.
And that's what we love.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is why these stories capture our imagination.
It's true.
If we answer the question, we have to end the podcast.
Yeah, it's done.
So we'll just keep it going.
We at least have to end this one, which is sad. But next week, we will have Elizabeth's husband and co-host, Andy Rosin.
Love this.
Nice.
And so stay tuned for part 2 of that. But in the meantime, Elizabeth, where can people find your work?
You guys can find me at Elizabeth Laime on Instagram, Totally Laime on Twitter, and it's LAIME. And find our podcast, Totally Laime, which Michael will come back on soon.
I'd love to.
On iTunes or wherever people podcast.
Right.
Sweet.
And please, it's one of my favorite long-going podcasts.
Thanks,
much
man.
fun. I know you've
This was so much fun.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
good.
We're glad
You're
you
such a
enjoyed
lovely
it.
Great.
guest. Yes.
Great, awesome, Mr. Riley Bray of the Beast of Bray Road. What do you got?
I'd like to apologize to our Canadian listeners. We know you're not all cartoon people, but it's a really fun voice.
My wife's Canadian, so.
And thanks for Neil Young.
I
thanks
can
for
do
doing
it.
that.
Yeah, Bryce's wife's Canadian, so I can make fun of Canadians.
So you're all good here.
Okay,
you
good.
all have passes.
Bryce.
Check us out on our social media accounts. We work really hard to integrate them with the show, with pictures and cool things like that. So we're on Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club, and we're on Twitter at Bigfoot_C Club, and we're also on Facebook. And a big shout out, if you want to check out more special episodes and content that we do, please check out our Patreon page, which you can find on patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club. We also have been working to collate cool episodes on there. So if you like what we do for the price of a cup of coffee, subscribe to our Patreon page.
That's great. Actually, that's a good plug. We'll announce we have our Maze episode on the Patreon. We're doing another Bigfoot Movie Club episode. This month's movie is going to be, I believe, the 1972 classic The Beast of Boggy Creek.
The Legend of Boggy Creek.
I was seeing Beast of Bray Road. The Legend of Boggy Creek.
Yes.
So there's a book called The Beast of Boggy Creek. That's what. So The Legend of Boggy Creek. I found it on Amazon and DVD for like $6. If you want to order it, that's cool. I'm sure it's streaming. I'll post more information about that. But that episode should be dropping fairly soon, if not around the time of this episode.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot more. We have bonus conversations with certain guests sometimes. We do other bonus episodes. So we got a lot more content over there on the Patreon page. And while you're there, swing by Totally Lame and check out their Patreon campaign as well.
That's so
if you're
nice.
Yeah,
a fan of
hell
the
yeah.
show.
Thanks.
I'm
Thanks
a
for that
patron.
plug.
I'm a patron.
I'm
I
going to
know
be
you
after
are.
today.
Love it.
So awesome. Thank you so much. As always, thanks to Riley Bray for his engineering and producing skills. We thank Suneaters for our song Come Alone, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. And again, huge thanks to our guest, Elizabeth Laime. We love you. It's been a pleasure. We'll definitely have you back on the show in the future. So get some paranormal...
Go find some ghosts. Go find some ghosts.
Don't worry.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Yeah, see ya next time.